Okay, hi. Welcome everyone. Can everyone hear me? Okay, great. So thank you so much for joining us. We accidentally started a little bit early, so a few of you have been in here for a while. Appreciate you sticking it out with us. Um, and I'm Emily. I work for Working Washington on the Pay Up campaign. So a lot of you have probably heard from me or gotten texts from me. Um, and I'm very, very excited to have you all here. We also have a number of people who are going to be speaking at this meeting today. Alexis, who's working on policy development for us, and a number of leaders on the campaign who are gig workers, including Matt, Teresa, Chris, Daniel, Kaylana, Vanessa, Sarah, and Mia. Um, and I'm very excited to have all of you here as well. And just to let you know a little bit about how these Zoom calls work, this is a webinar call. So those of you who are just tuning in, you are not on video. You don't need to worry about muting yourself. Just a few of us are going to be on video, and you guys can participate in the chat. But I also wanted to make sure that we had a chance to dig in a little bit deeper for those of you who do want to go on video. So after this webinar, we're going to have a live video Q&A, and you'll get the link to that. And you can join after the webinar ends if you would like to dig in a little bit deeper and go on video yourself. So, we have a lot of stuff to get through today. There's a lot of updates on the campaign and a lot of things moving forward. So we do want to kind of try to get through our agenda in about an hour. And after that, we can dig in a little bit deeper in that Q&A video call. Another thing to know about Zoom, just if you're typing in the chat, make sure that you are set to send your messages to all panelists and attendees rather than just all panelists, or only the people on video will see you. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And there's a number of people here who have been involved in the Pay Up campaign for some time. But there's also a lot of people here who I know are new to the Pay Up campaign, and I'm really excited to have you here. I want to give a quick background on what the Pay Up campaign is for those of you who are new, and for those of you who aren't, just bear with me for a minute while I give people some background. And in the meanwhile, it would be great if you guys could introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know your name, your location, and what apps you work on, and why you want to fight for gig workers' rights. So, like I was saying, a lot of you know this already, but Working Washington is a workers' rights organization. We worked on really big campaigns like getting a $15 minimum wage in Seattle and SeaTac, getting a domestic workers' bill of rights in Seattle, and getting secure scheduling for food and retail workers in Seattle. We started organizing with Instacart workers in January, and that campaign moved really, really quickly. Instacart workers had been facing major pay cuts, and they were also dealing with their app stealing their tips and factoring them into pay. They did an incredible job of organizing and speaking out. They got a ton of national media attention, a ton of support from customers and the public. They made several demands of Instacart, including no longer stealing their tips, as well as raising their base pay. And Instacart ultimately did concede to one of those demands. They stopped taking tips, or at least said they would, and admitted that they had been. But at the same time, they cut their base pay, and the pay on Instacart was still way too low. So that was kind of the moment we realized we really need some outside accountability for these gig companies. It's not enough to just raise the alarm about these things they're doing. We actually need to fight for new laws that will protect independent contractors and protect gig workers' pay. So that's kind of the origin of the Pay Up campaign. And what we're doing now is we're fighting for new laws at the local level that will protect independent contractors. And there are three major demands that we have. The first one is a pay floor equivalent to at least $15 an hour plus the cost of expenses. The second is tips should always be on top. They should never be factored into pay. And the third is better transparency from the apps that we work for. Um, so, you know, as we're doing this organizing, we're hearing from a lot of workers on specific apps about specific issues that they face too. And one of the things that I wanted to give you all an update on that happened this weekend is what happened with pay on Postmates. I think that there's probably a lot of Postmates workers in here. I'm seeing a number of you in the chat. And this weekend, Postmates cut their pay pretty dramatically. Some people are facing pay cuts of up to 30%. And it's both another great example of why we really need outside accountability for these gig companies, and it's a chance for us to do something to hold that specific company accountable. So along the way, as we're working towards these laws and towards that long-term project, we can also dig into some of that specific work of how do we call out these gig companies and make sure that people know what they're doing. So welcome to Postmates workers who have joined this call. I know that a lot of you signed up after what happened this weekend, and we would really like to support you in organizing both towards the larger project of creating these new laws and specifically on holding Postmates accountable. So to that end, we're actually planning to have a small meeting of Postmates workers specifically on Wednesday. And since I think there's probably a number of Postmates workers here on the call, I wanted to get a sense of what time might work best for you to have that meeting on Wednesday. So the times that we were thinking about were 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Pacific time, 3 p.m. Pacific time, or 5 p.m. Pacific time. And if you could just let me know in the chat which one of those times would work best for you, that would be really awesome. Okay, so I'm going to talk really quickly now about what our agenda is going to be for today. One of the first things that we want to do is talk about where we're at on developing our major demands into real policies that we can fight for. After that, we want to dig into how we do organizing at the local level to achieve those goals. We're going to have a quick update on what's happening with Postmates, and then talk about an idea we have for a system to rate gig companies to hold them accountable. And then we're going to get into planning a national weekend of action for gig workers. There's a lot of workers who are really interested in doing something to raise awareness of these issues and bring more attention to workers' rights in the gig economy. And we think it's about time that we plan a national action to make that happen. And then, like I said, after this webinar call ends, we will have a Q&A and a separate video call. And you can get to that video call by using the link that's on your screen right now, bit.ly/payupmay. And I'll remind you of that again at the end of this meeting. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about is policy. One of the important steps in the process of a campaign like this that kind of happens behind the scenes is that we want to go from these big, bold demands that we have to actual detailed policy that we can show legislators and demand be put into law. So Alexis is the policy expert who's working on developing that policy alongside a number of you who have contributed to that process. And she's going to give us some background on what policy development means and where we're at in that process. So go for it, Alexis. Alexis, it seems like you might be on mute. You might need to unmute yourself.
All right, now can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good now.
Okay, great. Sorry, I had called in, so sorry about that.
Alexis, I'm not hearing you. Are you guys hearing Alexis?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now I can hear you.
Last time, I'll try this one more time. So I'm excited to be here with a lot of you guys. You know that I actually spoke with a number of you when we did a policy-specific call a couple of weeks ago, and just got really interesting feedback and important feedback on the policy that we're developing, and we spoke about the policy development process. So as Emily said, I work with Working Washington, collaborate with Working Washington on developing this policy. We've also collaborated on the domestic workers policy, Fight 15, and other things. So excited to dive into this one. So for us in the policy development process, it always starts and ends, and the whole thing really centers around your guys' experience as workers working with these apps and helping us to understand so if there's specific demands, what the actual experience is of day-to-day work, so that when we're developing policy, it doesn't have unintended consequences that don't actually solve the problems that you're trying to solve. So for us, the first step in the policy development process was creating a survey, was putting out a survey that more than 500 different gig workers took. And it really helped us to understand a number of your perspectives and your input on how we should be developing the policy around these different demands. And again, the three demands are a pay floor, a tips on top, and transparency. We found that 85% of you support a wage floor, a pay floor of $15 an hour plus expenses. So that's overwhelming support right there. 96% of you support tips on top, not surprised at all, because who wants their own tips, who wants their tips stolen? And we got really interesting feedback on what types of expenses should be included. So things like, should cellular data be included? Should miles driven be included? And also ideas around when active pay or active work starts and stops. So it was really helpful to get all of this feedback in the context of the survey. Once we had an idea of what the policy goals were and we knew your input and priorities, the next step was to look at how other cities have tried to achieve the same thing. So we did a pretty in-depth policy dive into what is going on in New York, where they've set pay floors. Connecticut, the same thing. Chicago's been doing really interesting things around transparency. Really looking how other people are approaching this in different cities and municipalities in order to kind of inform what are the different strategic directions that we could be taking to here in Seattle. Similarly, what hasn't been done yet that we want to make sure that we're doing. So one of the interesting innovations here, similar to what we did with the domestic workers campaign, is that we're really focusing on setting standards that are about the work and not dealing with like classification, for example. And so after we went through that process of the survey and then we did the research on what's going on in other parts of the city, we now have a pretty thorough understanding of what we're proposing. And then we did the meeting with other, a couple weeks ago, as I mentioned, with other, with some of you guys actually to get feedback on that. And after that, we refined the policy further. So right now we have a one-pager that we've been working on that considered a lot of the questions that had come up over the course of this process. And so we have really zeroed in on this $15 an hour plus expenses. And we have really dealt with the issue of when active work starts and stops. We think that that's included in there. We're also decided to include, based on everybody's input, a minimum mileage reimbursement and making sure that the work is covered for the purposes here in Seattle, that work is covered whether it starts or ends or takes place partially in the city, it should be included. So understanding where the universe of work and where that takes place is. And then one other thing that I want to highlight that was important to us to include in this first demand was to ensure that a base pay floor does not preclude any additional bonuses or incentives. That's something that came up in that came up in the survey. It's come up in our previous webinars and conversations, and it's really important that this is just a floor, but it is in no way a ceiling. So we're setting a minimum standard, but we want to make sure that additional incentives and other types of bonuses can be included, but there should be transparency around that too. So then the next policy, aspect of the policy, again, was the tips on top. And for us, that means that you just have to define clearly that a tip is defined to that compensation is defined to exclude tips, and that a company is required to transmit the tip in full to workers without contributing to any of the pay that is owed by the company itself. So again, these things that seem evident, but for us, it was really important in the policy to be really explicit in that. And then finally, the third part of the policy is around transparency. And for us, that means, based again on everybody's feedback, that means that at minimum, you should be getting a digital pay stub, something that clearly states how much you're owed, what the basis of the pay is. So is it units of work, or is it amount traveled, what the tip amount was, how long you were active, how long you were online, and the miles that were traveled from when the task was first accepted until the end. So really just base transparency on this. We think that's important as well, in making sure that everybody knows what their pay is calculated on. We also think that there should be some sort of requirement around notice if they're going to be making major changes that are going to result in, like, say, for like Postmates, a 30% reduction in pay. But there needs to be some sort of notice, and it can't be something that just pops up and is a demand for you to accept it right then and there, or something that is sugar-coated into you thinking that it's not going to be something that actually impacts your pay in the long run. So those are sort of the areas that we've been working on in developing policy around the 3 demands. And our next step in this process is to continue working with the policy working group of gig workers, and to start meeting with other stakeholders and legislators in our city in order to start shaping what this will look like when it goes into practice.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alexis, for joining us and sharing all of that. So I know that all of you are pointing out that there is a spammer in the chat. We are removing him each time, but he just keeps coming back. So I really apologize for that. We'll try to figure out if there's a way to ban his IP address or something, but I'm not sure if there is. So I'm sorry that you guys have to put up with that, and hopefully you can join us in the video call later, where it'll be a little bit easier for us to really communicate with each other. So along the lines of what Alexis was talking about, you know, one of the really important steps that we can take as we're developing this policy and working towards getting these laws passed at the local level is building a base of workers in different cities who are willing to step up and be leaders and communicate with their local legislators. And a really important part of doing that is doing outreach locally in your community. We actually have a number of workers who stepped up over the last couple of weeks and have been hosting local meetings. So I'm going to have Teresa, who hosted a local meeting in Houston, share a little bit about her experience doing that. Go for it, Teresa.
Emily. Hello, everyone. Yeah, I started just a few weeks ago with my friend Allison. We do Instacart in Houston. And our reason for getting involved is that we needed to have a base in an environment where all of the workers can get together and have a local meeting and air out whatever issues they may have, you know, just have a vehicle in place so they don't feel like they're alone. They're out here alone. If there's a problem, they call Shopper Happiness and they're not getting any resolve. So we felt that it was essential that not only would build camaraderie between everyone, but they would know that there's someone out there fighting for them and the issues that they may have. We had our first meeting. We had it at an area where it intersected 3 zones. So if someone just wanted to stop in, pop in real quick and hear what was going on, get a flyer, and we had a survey to fill out, they can do so and just, you know, keep it moving and go on to what work they may have if they had any. So that was my introduction, was actually through my partner, Allison. Unfortunately, she can't be here today. So that was our experience. We only had 5 people come, but there was a lot of engagement in that meeting. And the thing that I took away was that they just wanted to know what this meeting was about, what was Working Washington and Pay Up was about. The one thing that stuck out was there were 2 people in particular that wanted a base minimum on the tip. All of the workers that were there were quite happy with doing their job, and but they just wanted to know that there was someone out there and to learn more about Working Washington and the Pay Up campaign. So that was basically my experience. For me personally, I wanted to have everyone understand what an independent worker is and what that entailed. You know, some of the workers in the area, especially in Houston, are quite young, so they may not know, you know, what that entails. So that was what I wanted to bring to the table at that meeting. And so that's basically how my experience was. And we wanted to see if we can get some other people that are involved to get involved. And that's what I would appeal to anyone that's out there listening now, to get involved, because you need to have that experience of banding together and knowing that what your concerns are, whether it's small or large, it matters, and that there's someone out there that is, you know, willing to go the distance for you in whatever issues you may have. So how do you step up? Do you want to step up and be a part of this movement? Do you want to attend a local meeting? There's a poll. So if you want to attend a local meeting, or you want to organize a local meeting, or you only like doing stuff online. So if those are the things that you like to do, there's a lot of ways that you can get involved with what we're doing. And that's why I'm here. That's it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Teresa, for sharing that. And thank you for organizing that local meeting. It really is a great way to identify local leaders and to create some personal connections with workers, which I think is really important when you're dealing with, you know, these apps that keep us really separated from each other. So one really big component of organizing a local meeting like that, that Teresa did an incredible job with, and that's important for those of you who are interested in organizing one to know, is it's all about doing outreach to fellow workers. And that outreach is something that you can do whether you're organizing a local meeting or just want to help grow this movement and bring more gig workers into the fight for workers' rights. And it's a very, very valuable thing for everyone to be doing. So I'm going to have Chris, who is a DoorDash and Postmates worker who's done a lot of that outreach work, share a little bit about his experience with doing outreach. So go for it, Chris.
I'm muted. Oh, can you guys hear me now?
Yep, you're good.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Hi, Teresa. Okay, so basically, I have been doing outreach for Working Washington and you know, the campaigns leading up to this for quite a while. So there's lots of different ways that you can get involved and reach out. There's okay, so you have, for starters, you can actually like go in Facebook groups and to reach out that way. There's lots of people in these Facebook groups, thank God for social media, that that basically are talking negatively or have issues with, you know, these companies. And a way to approach these people is, you know, just you know, the best way to do it is one-on-one. So if you could actually pull them outside of the group and talk to them by private message, that would be fantastic. But it's easy to do when you have the same similar views on these platforms. Another thing is outreach is probably the most important part of any campaign. Okay, so it takes a lot of time, but we have a lot of workers who are part of this campaign, and if we all pitch in and grow this movement exponentially, it'll be amazing, and it will be huge. If it's something that you believe in and you don't give up, keep trying, keep reaching out, because the outcome will be awesome in the end. So let's see. In this industry in particular, the companies really benefit from workers being separated, so they target new people. If you don't know that, there's new people that's what they rely on. They rely on the newbies, and then the people that have actually put in all the time and effort, yeah, those are the ones that they could care less about. That's why they offer these huge bonuses and then incentives. Let's see. So my experience with doing outreach is like I said, I've done a lot of outreach for gig workers online. I've done it in person. It's hard, but it's really also gratifying work. The reason why I care so much about reaching out to other workers is that I've seen the abuse. Okay, I've seen these companies abuse the system, and they just it's so irritating to me to watch and to see happen, especially to all the gig workers that are being taken advantage of. That's kind of why I volunteer my time in this campaign, because I want to make it right for all of the gig workers. Okay, so let's see. The best tips I can give you guys for doing this. Okay, it's useful to share links in groups. You guys, that's what I would recommend. Is just paste some of these links in the groups. It's a good way to get some people to respond. Then they create threads, and then you can grab people out of threads. Let's see. If you're sharing links on Facebook groups, don't just share the links. Ask questions. So engage in people like one-on-one, because that one-on-one engagement is going to be what's going to really create a conversation, and it's going to listen to what they have to say. And the best thing you can do is just answer their questions, and then half the time, like actually when I'm out doing dashes or whatever, I'll run into other people doing the same thing, and what I'll do is I'll just engage in conversation like, how do you like working for so and so? And they come back either with a negative response, or they say they love it. So that's a good way to actually start a conversation with people if you're going to do it in person. So let's see. Don't get discouraged is another thing, because you're going to get a lot of people that will just that they'll have a negative, or they'll have a different view than you do. Again, these are new people sometimes that don't get to see the big picture, but they eventually will, most likely. So if you're doing social media outreach, it's a good idea to go into Facebook groups or on Twitter and look for people. Like I said, it's a good way. Or even Reddit's a good one. It's about having real conversations with people. So it's not just giving them a pitch or trying to get them to a link, but it's really about engaging and asking questions and finding out what they want to see changed, and if they want to be a part of something bigger. So it's about connecting with everybody. We all need to connect together because we're so separated right now. So for people who want to do that in-person outreach, we've created flyers. So they'll be available on the website. So just go to payup.wtf and in the Facebook group, PayUp. So yeah, and then you could just hand out these flyers. If you don't feel comfortable necessarily engaging in a conversation, it's a good way to do that too also.
Great, thank you so much, Chris. So yeah, I see that a ton of you asked about flyers in the chat. We do have flyers you can use, like Chris mentioned, at payup.wtf/flyers. You can print them and cut them out and use them. I would definitely recommend to those of you who want to use flyers that you don't just hand them off to people, but that you actually use them as a way to set up conversation with them. And like Chris was saying, that one-on-one conversation is really important. It's important that people feel personally connected and that they feel heard, and that they understand that they're part of something bigger that is fighting for all of us together. So feel free to print those flyers off. It would be great to have you guys handing those out in your local areas, especially so that we can reach people who maybe aren't on social media, who aren't in like the Facebook groups or on the Reddit. Doing that outreach is a really, really valuable thing to do. So next up, we're going to talk a little bit about what is going on with Postmates workers. And this is a great example of, how workers within apps and across apps can reach out to each other and bring each other into the campaign, because Postmates workers have mobilized really quickly in response to these pay cuts and have been communicating with each other and working with each other online to push back and organize. So Daniel, who is a Postmates worker, is going to tell us a little bit about what's going on with Postmates. So go for it, Daniel.
Thanks, Emily. Happy to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity for being here. I just wanted to talk a little bit about moving forward with the Pay Up campaign. Since we're pushing for new laws, one thing like Postmates, I think they're the ones that are standing out the most right now, because first we had Uber, but now I think Postmates just kind of upped the bar, so to say. So I didn't know about this at first. The whole Postmates pay cut thing, I didn't receive an email until just yesterday, actually, now that I think about it. The way I found out about the pay cuts with Postmates, it was through my Facebook groups. So I was going on my Facebook groups, I was checking it out, and then someone posted an image. And when you see these kinds of screenshots from emails with Postmates, you always kind of think like, oh, maybe it's like fake, or maybe someone just like, troll trying to scare us or something. But it wasn't the case. And I was asking around, I was trying to figure out what happened. Eventually I decided, you know what, I'm gonna work, and then I'm gonna see how much I really earn. So the thing was that I went out and I said, well, if I'm not gonna go out and do Postmates only. The only way I could see a turnout for this is if I do it with DoorDash Active, because these changes came out of nowhere. So I wasn't really sure if they were in effect already, or if they were just announcing it. Another thing about this is someone mentioned in one of my Facebook groups was that, they're like, well, remember those forced arbitrations, terms of service agreement they made us agree to? And then they're like, well, maybe that has something to do with the pay cuts. And we're like, oh my God, that's so true. Like, they're connecting right there. We just put it 2 and 2 together, and we're like, wow. So that's what that was for. Maybe they were preparing for it. So maybe this really didn't come out of nowhere. So that's what we're trying to figure out. I began making polls on my Facebook groups trying to figure out how many places are affected, how many regions are maybe different. They have this pay cuts. And I started noticing that people were sending me screenshots that they had different amounts per pay. So one person, like in my area, I get 140 per pickup, and another gets 155. And some others I get 60 cents on a mile. They get 45. So that's what I've been trying to understand and figure out. So one thing we started coming up with, because I'm in the LA region, and this is the region that was affected by Uber and their 20% pay cut as well, their fare cut. And we were just like, I was excited because I was pretty upset myself, but I started noticing that even the people that were like, oh, they're kind of conforming, like, oh, I guess you can still make your money, even they were kind of pissed. So we came up with like sort of just like a little idea of like, oh, what about no drive Wednesdays, or Thursdays or something, just a whole day we don't drive or anything. I'm like, oh, well, I'm in. So that's kind of an idea of what we can do to organize. Another thing is we have to coordinate together. We really need the support of everyone to be able to do these things, because if there's no support, there's no people saying I'm in, nothing really gets done. So that's a really big important thing. Another idea was like handing out the flyers that Working Washington is making. That's definitely an idea, and we got to get out of the stigma, because I used to never be really comfortable telling my customers like, oh, did you know Postmates pay me this much? But at this point, I'm kind of desperate. They really need to know this stuff, and they really don't know. I went on Twitter and I even saw someone saying like, oh wow, they wanted their money back because they were really upset that even their driver is complaining about his pay, that it wasn't fair for Postmates to do that to them. And it was a customer actually pointing that out. So that's when it really clicked wow, these people really do care. They really do, want to know where their money is going. Because if I tip someone, I want to know where my tip is going. Like, I don't want to know that some dude is going to pocket it. I want to know that the person who worked hard for it got it. So those are a couple ideas we're throwing out. You guys come up with your own stuff. I definitely something unique, something that grabs people's attention, even if it's like creative, maybe an art piece, I don't know, do what you can. But that's just the thing. We're really hopeful about organizing here in LA and hopefully other regions so that we can work together to change something, so we can let them know that, this is not okay. But yeah, that's so far what I have for you guys. Thank you.
Awesome. Daniel, thank you so much for sharing that. So, like we've been saying, the entire goal of the Pay Up campaign as a whole is to pass new laws, but that's going to be a long process. And along the way, there's going to be things like this that happen with Postmates, where we really need to be pushing back and making sure that workers organizing for their rights is part of the narrative. And so I'm glad to see that a bunch of Postmates workers have answered this poll about when we should hold our meeting on Wednesday. I will get Postmates workers a link to that meeting, to RSVP for it later tonight. And we'll be able to dig in a little bit deeper on what we can do specifically for Postmates. But one of the things that this issue with Postmates brings up is there are a lot of different issues on different apps that workers are facing. There's a lot that's the same too, right? None of these apps are really paying the way that they should be. But there are differences in how different apps pay, and there's differences in how they treat workers. And so one thing that can be really valuable to do is to actually rate different apps and make them compete against each other a little bit. And we're working on a system to do exactly that. The idea is, the apps rate us, so we should be able to rate them too. And it's honestly unclear at this point if there are any apps that deserve a 5-star rating for how they treat workers, at least any major apps. But I think there's really a value in having apps compete against each other for workers, because they really rely on bringing in a ton of new workers all the time. That's what makes them function, and it's also what makes organizing really, really difficult. So if we can call out the worst offenders and make it clear exactly how those apps are paying and sharing that information, I think that could be a really valuable thing to do. So you can think of it kind of like a glass door for apps. It'll allow workers to make more informed decisions about which apps they work for, and it'll allow us to hold companies publicly accountable who are doing a bad job with how they treat their workers. I just saw that Eva asked, do you want us to rate the apps or rate the company? That's a good clarifying question. It's about rating the company and how they treat workers, but just specifically for app-based companies. So we're gonna be launching this app rating system in the next couple weeks. And if we wanna have a comprehensive system of rating these apps, we're definitely gonna need to do a lot of outreach to workers on various apps. Our goal is going to be to get ratings from 1,000 workers so that we can have comprehensive information about what each app is paying and how they're treating workers. So all of you guys I know work for a bunch of different apps, and it would be a great help to getting this system out there and being to hold companies accountable if everyone can spend some time sharing that gig app rating system with other workers. So I'm going to do a poll right now to see if you guys will be able to help out with that. And I think it'll be a great way of shining a light on the companies that are doing the worst by workers. So next up, we're going to be talking about something that I know a lot of you guys are really excited about, which is planning a weekend of action for gig workers' rights. I think it's become very clear that the issues that we're seeing are not confined to any one app, and that it's really important for customers and the public to know what gig workers are dealing with. So we want to plan a weekend of action where we'll be raising awareness of these issues And we have a few ideas about what it could look like, but we really want to plan it with all of you here at the meeting. So Kaylana is going to talk a little bit about planning a weekend of action. Go for it, Kaylana.
Okay, can you guys hear me okay?
We can hear you, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I thought that this was a great idea, planning a weekend of action, especially dealing with different gigs and different apps. And especially it seems like a lot of the different companies that a lot of us work for are having some of the same issues as far as pay. And of course, each pay scale is different. And so it's very important for us to be able to coordinate across different apps because, like I said, we're having some of the same issues. And it seems like once we take one step to get some type of victory, then they try to do something else to try to throw that off. And so it's good to at least try to bring some type of awareness to the community because a lot of people don't know. And I don't think it's necessarily that some customers don't care. It's just that some of them may not know what to do. And I think that planning this weekend of action is a great idea to bring awareness not only to the gig workers, but also to the community and to the customers as well. Now, the goal of the weekend of action is basically to make the customers and supporters aware of what's really going on with us, and so they can understand what we're going through, and not also how we're being treated and how we're being paid, but also how the customers are being deceived as well. And we also want to be able to get some attention for the campaign and to cause and to build support for passing new laws. And this is very important to be able to bring awareness to Congress and also to our lawmakers to let them know how we're being treated and also how we're being paid and underpaid. And so I think this is very important. And I do believe that once we're able to bring this to the lawmakers, that I think they probably will most likely take a look at it and make some changes. And so even by starting small and them seeing some of our small victories, I think this would probably be a great turnaround, at least in my opinion. And also this is to bring workers together around to share a goal. And basically this is all the same goal, is to bring awareness to how gig workers are performing on the platform and how we're being treated, and also how painful it is for us to not being it's kind of painful for us not to be paid the way that we should be paid. And I know that it's things have also changed with Uber Eats. Like Uber Eats is actually one of my favorite apps to work with, and I do pretty decent with it. Lately, at least for me personally, my tips have increased like dramatically with Uber Eats. However, they recently changed the pay scale to where now customers can tip a percentage. It's almost like how Instacart is now. How they changed that to where it's like 5%, at least minimum. Now Uber Eats have changed it to where a customer can tip a certain percentage. So instead of them giving you maybe like a $7 flat tip, it's like you might end up getting $6.70 or $6.50, whatever the percentage of your order was. And so, and to me, like, I don't understand why they're doing that. And so I think it's also something that I believe that should be brought into the National Weekend of Action, is also bringing Uber Eats into into the mix, because they're doing the exact same thing as Instacart is, kind of manipulating the system and how we're getting paid with our tips as well. So I don't think that they're doing that bad, despite how bad they're doing right now in the stock market. They're not doing that bad. So, and also we want to, basically directly call out some of the companies and change ways that that they're paying. And this is a good thing even for restaurants to know. I have talked with a few people that worked at some of the restaurants that I've picked up orders from, and they had heard about some things that are going on, with strikes and stuff like that. And so some of them are interested in even supporting us and how we take a stance against what some of these companies are doing. And so and I know some people may wonder, okay, so what would a weekend of action look like to make the gig companies pay up? So basically, we want to specifically target 3 or so apps to keep the action focused and basically to make the message clear. And so pretty much what Emily had just said, some of the main companies that are, the worst at paying the gig workers should be kind of on the forefront and, basically hold them accountable to how we're being paid and underpaid, and how they're supposed to change the whole system and, dispersing compensation to us. And also there are a few elements to this that we the actually Working Washington have discussed in incorporating this. So one of them is some kind of collective action by workers by setting their own pay floor and demonstrating against companies in person. And so this is a great idea. So basically we can have a system to where we can say, okay, this is how much we should get paid per hour or per batch or per order. And then actually showing this, okay, so this is how this will benefit us and how we can perform better, not only just how we're getting paid, but also how we're being treated. And so we can basically form rallies against the companies that are doing this, whether it's DoorDash or Instacart or whoever. And we also want to target specific stores and companies that partner with these apps and ask them that they call the company's policies for change. So if Uber or DoorDash partners with Cheesecake Factory or Spoleto or whatever, it's basically contacting them and speaking with them and just to let them know, how they can take part in supporting the movement and not just to, hurt the company, because I think some companies may be concerned about, okay, is this going to hurt our brand? Is this going to, no, it's not. And so I think that when we kind of lay out some of the rules and just basically state what we're doing, I think this will be a great turnaround so companies can also be able to gain leverage in supporting the workers as well. And so the last thing is also, basically get customers involved. And so I think that once everyone decides to, come together collaboratively and talk about, okay, what are some of the best ways to speak with customers about our pay and about some of the strict rules and how we have to abide by just to be able to deliver or to perform on these platforms and let them know. And just like you guys said earlier, flyers are a great way, of course, and word of mouth. And I think also how we deliver the message to the customers is very important. And so if they don't know what's going on, and of course, if we don't tell them, they won't know. So just being able to deliver the message the right way to get them involved is wonderful. So I think that overall, planning a weekend of action is wonderful, and how we market it and how we portray ourselves out there can bring a great impact on bringing awareness to what we're doing. So that's all I have to say about the weekend of action.
Great. Thanks so much, Kaylana. So, like we've said, we really want to plan a national weekend like this with you guys. I think it would be a really powerful way to send a message to gig companies and also to get the word out there about what's going on. And we want to do some of that planning right now on the call. So next up, we're going to have Vanessa, Sarah, and Mia each talk a little bit about what each of these things could look like and get your input on how we should plan it. So go for it, Vanessa.
Hey folks, Vanessa here. I'm a gig worker in Silicon Valley, and I wanted to invite you to plan alongside other workers like myself, collective actions for our upcoming weekend of action. We're preparing for the weekend after Labor Day. Workers across platforms have already started discussing collective actions together, and we want to spend some time planning those right here in this meeting. Please feel free to share your input about these ideas in the chat, and we'll use your contributions to formulate a plan. From that plan, we'll put out a call to action for gig workers across all platforms. One of our campaign's central demands is for a $15 an hour plus expenses pay floor. We believe strongly in the need for legislation to ensure this basic standard of compensation for all gig workers. To raise awareness of our demand for this pay floor, one of the actions workers have proposed is to actually collectively implement this pay floor ourselves during our weekend of action. As an independent contractor, we retain the right to accept or reject any offer that we're presented. The idea is really simple. You accept offers that meet these standards and reject offers that fail to ensure this minimum standard of pay. To assist in the process, we've developed calculators for Instacart and DoorDash, and we can create similar tools for the other apps that generate an hourly rate of pay per offer. These calculators use information you receive about an offer before accepting it, such as the pay, mileage, and estimated time to complete an order, and generate an equivalent hourly rate. So right now we're going to do a poll really quickly. Would you be willing to participate in collective action to set your own pay floor on the apps we work for during our weekend of action? Implementing these standards not only functions to ensure that we don't lose money by accepting lowball offers, it also functions to increase the rates of the subsequent reoffers. In effect, it drives wages up. In being selective about which offers we accept, we have the power to use our own system against them. As an individual, this is a powerful action, as it allows you to truly set your own rates and assert your own value. However, collectively, this action has immense power to force platforms to pay attention and, more importantly, pay up. To have the greatest impact, we'll need as many workers as possible on board. We will need to do planning, outreach, and organize with workers across all apps. So we're gonna throw another poll up real quick, and it is gonna ask you, will you put the time in to reach out to workers and ensure that they participate too? In addition to the collective action of setting our own pay floor, a lot of workers wanna organize direct actions, and that's an important part of this because it allows workers to take back the narrative and demonstrate our collective power. We have the power to affect change. Let's flex it. One idea for direct actions would be protests at these companies' headquarters, such as Uber, such as Lyft did recently. We would love to see any other creative ideas that you guys have to organize direct actions all over the country. If you have any creative ideas or suggestions about planning these kinds of actions, totally throw them in the chat. I'm going to be done now. Thank you for your time, and I'm going to pass it along to Sarah.
Hey, I'm hoping I'm not one of these people that's going to get in trouble for volume. So Emily, if you could just like raise your hand if there is a problem with my volume, otherwise I'll just keep talking. Okay, cool. So Kaylana already talked about holding businesses, partners accountable. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about it. I don't want to take too long because I know it's been a long meeting already, but I'm super, super excited about this idea. It's something that we wanted to do forever. And basically, let's start with Instacart. In the past year, they've lost deals with Whole Foods and Target. So right now, they cannot afford to lose a partner store. They can afford to lose Publix, Costco, Wegmans, any of these stores that are typically in like top 100 best companies to work for. Like these companies usually really, really, really care about their PR and how well their employees are treated. So for so long, they've gotten away with like hiding. And even though they know Instacart's in a lot of trouble for the way that they treat their workers, Publix and all of these companies just stay quiet and they act like, oh, well, we're not involved. So our goal, and we want your opinion if you agree, is to start pointing the finger at them and saying, you know what's happening, why aren't you doing anything about it? So that these companies will then go to Instacart and say, hey, like, we can't have this PR, we can't have this mess, you need to fix things or we're done. That's the way I see it, but I'd love to hear your opinions. What else? Oh, so like, let's say DoorDash. DoorDash works with also a lot of companies that have really good PR, like let's say Chipotle. They have a reputation for treating their employees good. So if we go after the big companies, I mean, of course, we're not going to go after like Mike's Pizzeria in Tallahassee, but we're going to go over like the known companies that are known to treat their employees good. All right, I think that's all I'm going to say because I know we only have a few minutes left. Emily, is that good? You want me to say anything else?
No, I think that's great. And now we're going to dig in on the third element of the weekend of action, which is getting customers involved. And Mia is going to talk about that.
Hey guys. Okay, so we all know that we are not alone in this because it's not an us versus them. It's basically us, the customer, the businesses, and then of course the platforms. We want to make sure that we're all working together. And without the customer speaking up, these apps, they really don't have to listen to us. I mean, after all, they're doing shady business with us in the first place, yet even though it's been out there, nothing's being changed. So without the customer speaking up, I think that after all, like I said earlier, that they don't have to do anything, that in truth, nobody has to do anything. So that's, as you can see, it's also one of the reasons why we are having so many trolls on here. Anyways, so how do we get the customers on board? At this point, this is the part where I ask you to have a little bit of courage, because you are our first and foremost viewing to the customers themselves. After all, how many of you have been told, I wish you were my only shopper, or I wish you were my only person? That's when you talk to them. You tell them what's going on. I will admit that there has been a little bit of backlash, and a lot of you have read about it too. Some people don't like having flyers just putting it inside their grocery bags. So this is the part where I know we don't want to talk about money, but this is where you talk to them and tell them and show them how it's affecting you. We want to make sure that everybody has an input. So we're about to launch a poll as to how should we get the customers involved. So if there's any other ideas that you guys have, what do you think? Can you help us out? And so back to you, Emily.
Great, thanks, Mia. So, we're going to be working through developing the plan for this weekend of action. And there's already been a ton of helpful input in the chat, and we'll probably set up some kind of meeting going forward for people who really want to help plan this action. There's a lot of different details to work through, like how do we target partner companies and hold them accountable? What do we want to ask customers to do, and how do we reach out to those customers? And then how do we get more workers on board with the idea of setting our own pay floor for a weekend of action? There's a lot of details that we need to plan out before we can make our call to action and announce this to the whole world. But it's really exciting to see that there's a lot of energy around doing this, and that a bunch of you have said you want to help with outreach or you want to help with planning it. I'm really, really excited about that. So we're going to be in touch about the next steps in planning that weekend of action. And we're also going to be sending out notes after this meeting. We're also going to be sending out notes after this meeting that will include an RSVP link for the next national meeting, and the link to the flyers that we mentioned, and a sign-up sheet for those of you who would like to sign up to host a local meeting. We're also going to be launching that app rating system, and we'll be sending that your way in the coming weeks. One thing I want to do before we close out is I love to set up a date for our next national pay up meeting. And I think at this next meeting is when we're going to be really focused on planning our weekend of action and doing outreach for it and bringing workers on board. So please go ahead and vote in this poll. One thing that can be really challenging about setting the times for these meetings is that people are in different time zones and work on different apps. So it's always a challenge to figure out the best times and dates to hold these kinds of things. So it's super helpful that you guys are able to give some input on what the next date should be. I'm seeing a lot of support for Wednesday so far. Wednesday's really pulling ahead. So I'll be in touch with all of those notes tomorrow. And one other thing that I want to do before we close out is I tried to launch a poll for Postmates workers at the beginning of this call, and I messed it up. So I would love to launch a poll specifically for Postmates workers and get your input on when we should hold our meeting on Wednesday. So go ahead and vote in that poll. If you work on Postmates, we'll be holding a specific meeting for Postmates workers Wednesday. For the rest of you, please stay tuned for the notes that are going to be coming out and the links we'll be sending your way. As long as we have your contact info, we'll be reaching out to you. And in about 5 minutes, we're going to hold our video call. And a lot of you had great ideas about things we should do during the weekend of action. I would love to see some of you on that video call so that we can dig into those. And it'll be a little bit easier for us to talk back and forth on like a smaller video call. But for those of you who are content with having sat through an hour-long meeting, which would be very reasonable of you, and I appreciate you staying here with us and learning and sharing everything you did, totally feel free to just log off and look for those notes in your inbox tomorrow. So if you would like to join the video call, we're going to start in 5 minutes at 6:05 p.m. And the link for it is up on the screen right now. It's bit.ly/payupmay. I will also post that link in the Pay Up campaign group on Facebook. If you're not in that group yet, please go ahead and join it. It's called Pay Up Campaign for Gig Workers' Rights. Pay Up is 2 separate words, and I'll post that link in the Facebook group as well. So thank you all so much for coming. It was great working towards planning this action with you. I'm sorry that our chat got accosted by spammers. We'll try to figure out a better way to deal with them next time. And I'll see some of you in a few minutes at 6:05 at bit.ly/payupmay. Oh, someone asked for me to post it in the chat. Posting it there really quickly so that you guys can copy and paste. Okay, and I'm going to post it again really quick now that we've gotten that spammer out. Okay. So we will see you at 6:05 if you would like to join us for the video call. And if not, thank you for being here. We'll be in touch. See you guys.